General Hospital spoilers reveal that TJ returned to Port Charles in a way no one could have predicted, not quietly, not humbly, but with the kind of seismic force that shifts the ground beneath every relationship it touches. And for Molly, the impact was immediate, brutal, and devastating in ways she didn't even have the vocabulary to describe. She had spent more than a year clawing her way out of the shadows of their breakup, piecing herself together in the fragile silence of early mornings, burrowing into her writing when her grief became too sharp to swallow, convincing herself that she was healing even as she still woke some nights with TJ's name sitting heavy on her tongue. She had learned to smile again, slowly, hesitantly, with Cody's patience guiding her like a hand hovering just above her back, never pushing, never demanding, simply waiting for the moment she was ready. Cody had been gentle in all the ways she needed, but never asked for, steady where TJ had been intense, open where TJ had been guarded, and willing to stand in the quiet with her as long as she wanted. Molly thought she finally had her footing, finally understood what it meant to move forward without looking back, finally believed she was allowed to choose a different kind of love. But then TJ appeared again, casting a shadow that swallowed all the progress she fought so hard to make. And he didn't come alone, he came with a child, a small, wide-eyed baby with hair the color of midnight and cheeks still soft with infancy. The child Andrea had sworn she lost. The child Molly had mourned without ever getting the chance to hold. Seeing them standing there, TJ with the baby cradled awkwardly in his arms, was like watching the universe split open. The truth pouring out in a way that tore wound inside her she didn't even realize was still raw. Her breath left her body in a violent rush, her knees trembled, and she felt the entire world tilt in a way that made every decision she had made since their breakup suddenly seemed fragile, temporary, breakable. Cody saw the moment Molly shattered. He felt it before she said a word, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her fingers curled in on themselves, the way her eyes locked on the baby with a grief so fierce it bordered on primal. He knew instantly that he had lost her, not because she chose TJ, but because the past had reached out its hand and dragged her back into a life she never stopped grieving, a life she thought she could convince herself wasn't meant for her. Cody tried to speak, tried to touch her arm, tried to anchor her in the present, but Molly couldn't hear him. Her mind was spinning too violently, collapsing under the weight of betrayal, hope, rage, and something even more terrifying, a surge of love for a child she didn't know existed. The questions collided in her head faster than she could breathe. Why did Andrea lie? How could TJ not know? Why did no one tell her? And what does this mean for everything she had just begun to build with Cody? The answers were nowhere, only shards of truth sharp enough to cut through her chest. TJ, for his part, wasn't calm either. His eyes were wild with confusion, fear, and exhaustion. The look of a man who had been punched in the stomach by truth and forced to stand upright anyway. He didn't know Andrea had disappeared with the baby until weeks ago. He didn't know she had been lying. He didn't know she had taken from him the chance to be a father, from Molly the chance to be a mother, from both of them the chance to fight for the future they once planned. He had searched, struggled, begged for clarity. And when the truth finally surfaced, when Andrea admitted she hadn't miscarried but fled, because she was terrified of letting the baby grow up in a situation she believed was unstable, TJ had no choice but to return. He didn't come back to claim Molly. He came back to confront everything that had been stolen from them. But Molly didn't know his intentions yet, didn't trust his explanations, didn't recognize a man standing before her with sorrow burning behind his eyes. All she could see was loss resurrected, dreams returned to light, and the unbearable truth that her heart wasn't done breaking. The moment stretched between the three of them, Molly frozen, Cody breaking, TJ trembling under the weight of years of silence, and the air vibrated with something dangerous, something irreversible. Molly felt the future she had begun to imagine with Cody crumble beneath her feet. She felt every tender moment, every slow step toward healing, every warm smile, every reassuring touch collapse like a tower built on sand. She didn't want it to fall. She didn't want to go backward. She didn't want to be the woman who always ran toward the past when the present got too complicated. But the baby changed everything, cracked open a piece of her heart she had locked away after losing the chance to be a mother. The first time, after believing she had to let go of that dream to survive. And now here it was, her child, maybe, possibly, unbelievably breathing, alive, real. Cody watched Molly drift further from him with each breath, and something inside him fractured. He had known this love would be fragile. He had known Molly's heart still carried scars shaped like TJ. He had known that stepping into her life meant accepting a ghost he could not compete with. But he didn't expect the ghost to return in the flesh with a child in his arms. He felt jealousy, yes, but also grief for the life he thought they might build. Grief for the future slipping through his fingers. Grief for the realization that no matter how much he loved Molly, He might never be enough if her destiny was tied to another man and a child that belonged to a past he could never erase. Cody wanted to fight for her, wanted to insist that she didn't owe TJ anything, wanted to tell her she deserved to choose her happiness rather than be consumed by old wounds. But he couldn't speak, not when he saw the way she looked at the baby, not with fear, not with confusion, but with overwhelming love. It broke him more gently and more painfully than any rejection ever had. Inside Molly, the storm grew stronger. She couldn't decide whether to scream or collapse or run. TJ's voice felt distant, like sound underwater, and Cody's presence felt like a thread slipping from her grasp. The baby shifted in TJ's arms and looked toward her with wide, innocent eyes. And in that second her chest tightened so violently she had to hold on to the back of a chair to steady herself. This was supposed to be her child. This was supposed to be her family. This was supposed to be the moment she had dreamed of long before her life cracked apart. And instead of joy, she felt pain so deep it hollowed her out from the inside. She wanted to take the baby and run, but she also wanted to run from the truth. She wanted to hold TJ, but she also wanted to scream at him until her voice broke. She wanted Cody to stay, but she also knew he couldn't be part of what came next. Every desire contradicted another, every heartbeat split into two directions, every breath felt like a betrayal. TJ reached toward her, not to touch, but to offer a fragile plea, one she didn't want but needed. He told her they had to talk. He told her they had to understand what Andrea had done. He told her the truth wasn't simple, and he wasn't here to take her away from the life she had built. But Molly couldn't process compassion. She couldn't process reason. She could barely process air. The only thing she knew for certain was that nothing would ever be the same. She felt Cody withdrawing behind her, felt TJ's presence pulling her forward, felt the baby anchoring her somewhere between past and future, and she wasn't ready for any of it. And so the moment broke her. Not quietly, not gracefully, but with a silent, devastating collapse deep within her soul. She realized that her life had split into two parts the second TJ walked in with the child she never knew existed. No matter what she chose, someone would be destroyed. No matter where she turned, something precious would be lost. And as she stood there trembling, breath shallow, heart tearing itself apart, Molly understood that this was the moment destiny had been circling her. For a very long time, the moment when her past, present, and future collided with enough force to bring her to her knees. TJ's fury simmered like something alive beneath his skin, a rage that had been building ever since he walked back into Port Charles with the child he never knew existed. And every second he spent watching Molly and Cody together only poured gasoline on the fire burning through him, transforming grief into anger, betrayal into obsession, and heartbreak into a terrifying conviction that he alone should decide the fate of his son. He had tried for a moment to be reasonable, to breathe through the chaos, to tell himself Molly's new relationship was none of his business, that he had forfeited the right to judge her choices when he walked away from their life. But every time he attempted to be rational, he saw the child looking up at him with eyes that held pieces of him and pieces of Molly. A child who should have been theirs to raise together, a child stolen by Andrea's lies, a child who had lived his first months in secrecy while Molly cried herself numb, believing she was not meant to be a mother. And the injustice clawed at TJ until he could barely think. Without feeling something break inside him, he watched Cody hover too closely, watched the way he tried to comfort Molly, watched the way he inserted himself as her protector, her anchor, her steady presence. And the more TJ watched, the more something territorial and wounded surged inside him, something primal that insisted no man had the right to stand where TJ once stood. No man had the right to hold Molly's heartbreak, to mend it, to rebuild her life in the shadows of the dreams she once built with TJ. Cody's calmness infuriated him. Cody's patience disgusted him. Cody's quiet strength felt like an accusation, as if Cody were silently declaring that he had done what TJ could not stay. And deep down, TJ hated himself for having left, hated Molly for learning how to keep breathing without him, hated Cody for helping her, hated the universe for allowing their family to form in the hands of someone else. That hatred twisted itself into paranoia, into fear, into a conviction that Molly had changed too much since their breakup, too emotional, too uncertain, too fragile, so fragile that she had allowed Cody to become a kind of emotional crutch, a dependency that TJ now viewed as a threat to his child. The thought horrified him, but the more it echoed in his head, the more it hardened into a dangerous belief. Maybe Molly wasn't stable enough to be a mother right now. Molly felt the shift in him before he said a word, the heavy silence that used to signal concern now pulsing with judgment and accusation. And it sent a cold shock of terror through her chest because she knew TJ well enough to recognize when he had lost his emotional balance, when his protective instincts turned suffocating, when his grief transformed into control, and she saw all of that happening behind his eyes, coiling together like storm clouds ready to break. She tried to speak, tried to explain that Cody didn't replace him, that Cody was simply the person who helped her survive the months after TJ left, that her heart was still rebuilding itself piece by piece. But her words dissolved as soon as they left her mouth because TJ wasn't listening. He was studying her, evaluating her, silently deciding whether she was worthy of the child she had waited her whole life to have. Molly's breath caught painfully in her throat when she realized that TJ wasn't just angry. He was questioning her fitness as a mother, questioning her emotional strength, questioning whether her connection to Cody made her unstable. And the horror of that realization hit her so violently she had to grip the table to stay upright. The world blurred around her, voices muffled, oxygen thin, and the floor felt like it was tilting because she had feared many things in her life. But she had never feared TJ, never feared the man she had loved so deeply, never imagined he could look at her with the coldness of someone considering taking her child away from her. Cody felt the tension snap like a whip in the air and instinctively stepped forward. But Molly flinched when he moved because she could feel TJ's eyes burning into them both, reading that flinch as proof of instability, proof that she leaned on Cody too much, proof that she wasn't strong enough on her own. Cody's chest tightened with helplessness as he watched Molly unravel, watched her stare at TJ like he had become a stranger, watched her shoulders shake as if her body was trying to contain a scream. She didn't have the strength to release. He wanted to put himself between them, shield her, argue with TJ, fight for her. But Molly shook her head almost imperceptibly, and Cody understood instantly his presence. His comfort, his love might actually make everything worse. If TJ believed Cody made Molly emotionally weaker, then every attempt to protect her would only reinforce that belief. So Cody stepped back, heartbreaking silently, understanding that he might have to let her stand alone in a moment she was not prepared for. Inside TJ's mind, the narrative sharpened by the second. Every tremble in Molly's voice, every tear in her eyes, every desperate breath she took fed the idea that she wasn't stable, that she was too fragile to care for an infant, that Cody had become a crutch rather than a partner. He replayed every rumor he had heard about her hardships during their breakup, every whisper about her struggling to regain her footing, every comment about how deeply she had collapsed after believing the pregnancy journey had failed. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that Molly was dangerously close to losing control, and a mother who was out of control could put the baby at risk. The thought twisted into something darker. Maybe Molly wasn't meant to raise this child, not now. Not like this. Not while she was clinging to a relationship that looked fragile and emotionally tangled. And once that idea took root inside TJ, it grew with terrifying speed. He began imagining what a judge would say, imagining himself presenting the story Andrea's lies, Molly's emotional instability, Cody's influence, and imagining a judge nodding sympathetically, seeing TJ as a more stable parent, agreeing that he should have primary custody. He could almost hear the ruling in his mind, could almost see himself walking out of the courthouse with his son, while Molly, pale and shaking, struggled to comprehend how she had lost everything. Molly felt the moment he made that mental shift, felt it like a blade pressed against her throat, and her panic exploded. Her heartbeat thundered so loud she could barely hear her own thoughts. Her chest tightened with suffocating pressure, and she tasted metal on her tongue as the full weight of the disaster hit her. She was about to lose her child. She was about to lose the only dream she had ever held sacred. She was about to be punished for surviving, for trying to rebuild, for daring to love again. And the injustice of it flooded her with a rage and grief so impossibly vast she couldn't contain it. Her voice tore from her in a panicked whisper, begging TJ to stop, to breathe, to hear her. But the words sounded distant to her own ears, like echoes from someone else's life. TJ's expression flickered pain, anger, confusion, longing, but the hardness remained. The terrifying resolve of the man who believed he was fighting for his son's future. And in that moment, Molly's world collapsed. She felt herself sinking, drowning in a tidal wave of helplessness, terror, and heartbreak. Cody reached out instinctively, but Molly stumbled away from both men, clutching her chest like she was holding herself together with her bare hands. Because the truth was too devastating to face. TJ had returned not as the love she lost, not as a partner she once trusted, but as the greatest threat she had ever encountered. And Molly realized with nauseating clarity that this wasn't a conflict, wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't a reunion. It was the beginning of a custody war she was not ready for. A war she might not win, a war that could destroy her completely. And as TJ stared at her with a father's determination and a broken man's fury, Molly knew that her life, her love, her sanity, and her future were all on the verge of burning to ash. The Dhamha had begun, and it would only get worse from here. TJ returned to Port Charles already carrying the weight of the child Andrea had hidden, and the explosive tension with Molly and Cody. But he barely had time to breathe before another crisis began pulling him in with brutal force. Jordan. The moment he saw her, he knew something was broken in a way he had not expected. Something in her eyes that flickered with exhaustion, fear, and the ghost of secrets too heavy for her to carry alone. And TJ felt a protective instinct roar to life inside him. A mission he didn't ask for, but one that tightened around his chest with every passing hour. Jordan had always been strong. A woman forged in the fire of impossible cases and impossible betrayals. But whatever Curtis had revealed, whatever past catastrophe had resurfaced, whatever emotional earthquake had shaken her foundation, had left her scattered in ways that terrified TJ more than he wanted to admit. He had come home thinking he was the one with a life in ruins. But Jordan's silence, her hollow stillness, her shaky attempts to pretend she was fine made it clear that he wasn't the only one who had been shattered by time and fate. He watched her stare at her phone without truly seeing it, watched her struggle to breathe whenever Curtis's name appeared in conversation, watched her keep secrets locked behind her teeth in a way that told him she wasn't just overwhelmed, she was drowning. And the realization that Curtis had once again left emotional wreckage in his mother's life ignited something volcanic in TJ, a protective fury sharpened by months of betrayal, fear, and guilt. And suddenly, he wasn't just trying to stabilize his own life. He was stepping into the wreckage of Jordan's too, determined to hold together what Curtis had carelessly let fall apart. TJ's mission slowly became clear. If Jordan wouldn't save herself, he would do it for her. He started subtly at first, taking over tasks she pretended she could handle, intercepting difficult conversations, shielding her from questions she wasn't strong enough to answer. But the deeper he dug, the more he saw the fractures in her emotional armor. Curtis had been through his own storm, but his actions had created a ripple of destruction that hit Jordan like a tidal wave, reopening wounds she thought had healed long ago. And now that TJ was back, he could see the aftershocks in every breath she took, in every quiet moment she tried to ground herself, in every forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. TJ wasn't prepared for this version of Jordan, wasn't prepared to see the woman who raised him crumble beneath the weight of other people's chaos. And it ignited a new fire inside him, a sickening blend of guilt, anger, and responsibility, because he had been gone too long, absent when she needed him most, chasing answers about the baby Andrea stole, while Jordan was being pulled apart from the inside. And now he was back to pick up pieces scattered across the floor, pieces no one else seemed willing to see. But the more TJ tried to stabilize Jordan, the more explosive the situation around him became. His return had already set Molly off like a bomb. His anger toward Cody was spiraling into something dangerous. The custody wildfire threatening to consume all three of them was only growing hotter. And now Jordan's unraveling added another layer of madness to a life already cracking apart under pressure. Everywhere TJ turned, there was fire. Everywhere he looked, there was someone on the edge of breaking. And yet, despite the chaos, despite the shifting loyalties and emotional landmines scattered across every relationship he touched, TJ found himself stepping deeper into the storm instead of backing away. He confronted Jordan gently at first, urging her to speak, urging her to breathe, urging her to stop pretending everything was fine. But when she finally let a fraction of the truth slip, her fear for Curtis, her confusion about the future, the secrets she was hiding out of duty or guilt, TJ felt something inside him snap. He wasn't going to let history repeat itself. He wasn't going to let Jordan carry burdens that weren't hers alone. He wasn't going to let Curtis's chaos define her life again. And the more he intervened, the more Jordan resisted. Not because she didn't want help, but because she didn't know how to accept it. Without collapsing completely, TJ could see the pain in her every movement, see the desperation in the way she avoided eye contact, see the exhaustion in her voice when she told him she was fine even though everything about her screamed the opposite. And that was when TJ realized that this wasn't simply a mission, it was a war. A war against the consequences of Curtis's mistakes. A war against Jordan's instinct to push people away. A war against the emotional decay infecting the people he cared about most. His return had unleashed something in Port Charles, a chain reaction of buried truths and resurrected feelings. And each day the tension escalated into something more volatile. People whispered about TJ's anger, about his custody plans, about the firestorm brewing between him and Cody. But no one understood the deeper shift happening beneath it all. TJ had become the epicenter of a storm spreading across every corner of his life. Jordan's emotional collapse, Molly's breakdown, Cody's heartbreak, Curtis's secrets, the stolen baby, the imploding relationships, the erupting mistrust. TJ saw the pattern emerging, saw the madness linking each person together, saw the way his return had to stabilize the delicate balance of Port Charles. And instead of shrinking from it, he felt himself standing taller, his determination hardening into something sharp and unshakable. He wasn't the man who left. He wasn't the man people expected him to be. He had come back forged by betrayal, by lies, by months of chaos. And he wasn't afraid to tear down anything that threatened the people he still loved. So TJ threw himself into fixing Jordan with the same intensity he once devoted to Molly. But this mission carried an urgency that left no room for hesitation. He began confronting people Jordan refused to confront. He began digging into information she tried to hide. He began demanding answers from Curtis, from those close to him, from anyone who might be connected to the devastating shockwaves Curtis had unleashed. And with every step TJ took, every boundary he crossed, every emotional landmine he stepped on, the narrative around him darkened. People began to whisper, TJ was back, and he wasn't the same. TJ was back, and he was building walls and burning bridges. TJ was back, and trouble followed him like a shadow. And they were right, because TJ's return wasn't peaceful. It wasn't healing. It wasn't simple. It was an eruption and ignition of truths long buried, a force pulling everyone into deeper conflict. A storm that promised things would only get worse before anyone found a way out. And as TJ stood in the center of it holding a child that should have been Molly's, staring down Cody with barely contained rage, trying to pull Jordan back from the brink while still fighting the disasters in his own life, it became clear that nothing in Port Charles would remain untouched. The madness had begun, and TJ wasn't just part of it. He was a spark that lit it.